So there's this concept in the Middle Ages that you have probably heard of from time to time, and it's called alchemy. And the idea is that there is some kind of, uh, not necessarily like witchcraft sorcery, but that there's some kind of chemical, scientific ish way to turn other elements from whatever they are, typically lead or something like that, into gold. And that if you can just figure out that process, you can be incredibly rich. Think the King Midas meets chemistry type of thing. You're trying to take ordinary stuff like rocks or water or really anything and turn it into gold. And it's not all hocus pocus like you might think. Even such renowned scientists as Isaac Newton, the inventor of calculus, the discoverer of the theory of gravity, right? Compiler of modern mechanics, Royal Academy member. He was also an alchemist as kind of a side hustle. At least he was very interested in it. And this is not long ago basically considered to be hard science. And we now laugh at it, of course. But I think this is a really good analogy for what the Bible calls redemption, right? The idea of buying back, renewing something, turning garbage into gold. And so, if it's not too crude, I think we can say that God is, in a sense, an alchemist. And I'm going to show you how today from this chapter, Genesis 41. So we'll see as we walk through it, first of all, suffering, and then fruit, and finally, redemption. So first of all, let's look at the thorns, the suffering and sin that happens here in these verses. You know, we all hyperbolize in this lost culture of ours. We say, oh, today was the worst day ever, right? Whenever anything goes, anything less than perfect for us. But think for a second about Joseph's situation. He wouldn't be very dramatic like we would if he said that, right? This is a guy who really can't catch a break. Like you might say, oh, worst day ever because you spilled some coffee or you forgot to charge your phone. No, think about, first of all, the external pressures on Joseph. Since we last checked in on him, he has been 2 whole years in a dark and slimy hole. Emphasize that length. What must Joseph have been thinking during these 2 years of further imprisonment? It reminds us of Paul's lament in the New Testament that he was tested beyond his ability to endure. Especially because, right, Joseph doesn't have a sentence where he's counting down the days. Oh, I've only got 2 years left. No, it's rather a completely open-ended sentence that just happens to unexpectedly end after 2 years. But how long would you be able to tough that out before you completely broke? Can you go 2 hours without your precious internet? And so we get, first of all, the setup, the occasion, right? Meanwhile, as Joseph is languishing with no end in sight in the palace, something's up. Pharaoh has a pair of dreams. Aha! You see, we've seen this before, haven't we? They are particularly troubling dreams. When your supreme ruler, who is supposedly a manifestation of the gods, or in some instances in Egypt is a god himself, when that guy gets upset, you fix it. Pronto. And yet all the magicians, all of the sorcerers, all of the occultists are impotent and powerless here. Right? Satan just doesn't know what God knows. Not only the soothsaying priests, but all the wise men, all of the pseudoscientific experts of the entire kingdom and court are hapless in this situation. Right? Don't tell the economists about this. Right? They all think that they can predict what's going to happen. But God does what he wants anyway, doesn't he? Now, all of this commotion is what it takes for the chief cupbearer to finally have this light bulb moment where he suddenly remembers something important that he shouldn't have forgotten. And so he very sheepishly kind of says, oh yeah, I know a guy from a while back. Yeah. 2 years ago when I was in prison and he told me not to forget him. Oh man, you forgot him. But of course he remembers for just this moment, as we'll see. And so he's summoned into Pharaoh's presence, and all of this external suffering is over in a flash for Joseph. You kind of had to use your imagination for what it was like, but now you're told, go, clean yourself up, change, make yourself presentable because the king wants to see you. But that's just the external thorns, the external suffering. There's also the internal. Because if you think this is the end of the thorny patch in Joseph's life, you'd actually be wrong. Think of him standing there, trembling before this power. Because for all Joseph knows, the reason that he didn't get out is because the interpretation of those other dreams before was wrong. Maybe the cupbearer was killed. Who knows? Joseph has had no information leaking to him in prison about what's been going on in the court. Surely Pharaoh has that authority to summon him here for a far worse fate. This is his first time meeting someone who has complete and total power over him. And there's no hello, there's no greeting, simply, you, quick, are you this so-and-so that I've heard about? What would you say in response to that question? You'd want to get on Pharaoh's good side, right? But no, actually, Joseph doesn't play along with the way that this question is couched at all. He doesn't say, yes, I can interpret dreams. I can do that. I remember way back in the day, my youth pastor at the time said, hey, can, the praise team stay back? And by the way, can Rob just hang back here for a minute? And he said to everybody, I want Rob to join the praise band, right? And well, why? Because he knows something that none of the rest of you know. He knows his scales. And I had only been playing guitar for a couple months, and I thought to myself quietly, oh man, I better go learn a scale before he finds out, right? There's none of that going on here. What humility on Joseph's part. There's not a hint of self-promotion in his heart. No, he gives glory to an even higher power than Pharaoh. You see, these thorns include but are not limited to our outward circumstances. They can be themselves the fruit of the heart. A bad heart produces thorns. A good heart produces fruit. Hebrews 6:8 says, the land that has drunk the rain that often falls on it produces a crop useful for those whose sake it is cultivated. Receives a blessing from God, but if it bears thorns and thistles, it's worthless and near to being cursed. Its end is to be burned. The Bible likes to mix its metaphors a bit on this count, and so I feel comfortable doing the same. Here is a diagram from Dr. Pallison over at Westminster, famous counseling professor. And you see the sun there with its heat beating down on the heart, and the two types of hearts producing different things as the result of that heat, of that difficult circumstance. That the thorns are the outward hardship choking off growth. It's the same at the same time, the inward bad consequences springing up. And so there is a slight shift because, of course, in that case, the heat, the pressure, the circumstances provokes the reaction that can produce thorns. I am not saying that suffering and sin are the same thing. Although there's a very narrow sense in which temptation can be considered suffering for the sincere Christian who wants to honor God. But in many ways, the result is the same. You see, both of them make ours and everyone else's around us life harder. They are opposed to and stifle growth and fruit. So thorns. Joseph's out of jail, but he's not yet out of the woods. No, he has to contend still with his own heart. And there are plenty of thorn-growing capacities in Joseph's heart. Do you disagree? right? Just consider our universal tendency towards pride and unbelief and self-serving. That is a kind of thorns, is it not? How do you respond when you feel unappreciated, when you feel overlooked, when you feel threatened or insulted, whether that's actual or just imaginary? How do you feel when someone cuts you off on the road? Do you feel like you're always performing, always having to put on a show, automatically drawing attention to yourself? Do you ever ask yourself, what is that? It's not just the culture. That makes it easier to go that direction, but ultimately, that is your heart. That's the thorns of unbelief. It's stealing God's credit, but not Joseph. Joseph gives credit where credit is due. He says, no, it's not me that can interpret the dream, but God will give Pharaoh the favorable response. That's the thorns. That's the suffering and sin, the external and the internal. But also, we see in this chapter, kept promises that produce fruit. Pharaoh tells the dream and he gives a little bit of his own editorializing, doesn't he? Why? Because he's scared. It's not Pharaoh's good relationship with the wheat god that's going to feed the people, is it? No, Pharaoh is powerless, and he knows it. These two sets of cows couldn't be more opposite. And moreover, the eating that happens here in this dream is the opposite of what we would expect. Right? We would think that the fat cows would devour the thin ones, but it's the other way around. This is not hungry hippos. Rather, the lean devour the fat, and they still don't look like they've eaten anything. So destructive will this famine be. All of the excesses of those fat years are utterly wiped out. And it's the same thing in the second dream, but with wheat instead of cows. And so Joseph tells Pharaoh not what Pharaoh wants to hear, at least not yet. He says the dreams are one. And of course, that's very common in these pairs of dreams that we keep seeing in the Joseph saga. Look with me at verse 32. The doubling of Pharaoh's dreams means that the thing is fixed by God, and God will shortly bring it about. In other words, it is certain and it is quick. That's what the Hebrew grammar here is emphasizing. Think, if you knew that this was going to happen to you, what would you do? Joseph has already established this isn't about him. And so what does he do? He takes a big risk in faith. He gives some unsolicited advice. That's not always a good idea with this Pharaoh, who can be rather temperamental. But I mean, what has Joseph got to lose? After all, what's he going to do? Throw him back in jail? He is at least a little bit tactful, though. He is careful to say that everything is under Pharaoh. Let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man, he doesn't say himself, and set him over the land of Egypt to store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh, of course, for food in the cities, and let them keep it so that the land may not perish through the famine. Again, this is not naked self-promotion. Really, this is just wise economics. Let's save the surplus for when you need it. Authorize someone to put austerity measures in place now when we can afford them. Rein it in and save for a rainy day. This is rationing. And the end goal is to avoid what? Being cut off. Extermination. That's the fulfillment of Pharaoh's dreams. But what is going to happen to Joseph? This is where we at last get to see part of the fruit sown by all of that long period of thorny suffering. Joseph's dreams take one more step. You remember Joseph's dreams? We're talking here about Pharaoh's dreams, but do you remember all the way back in chapter 37, Joseph's original dreams? that he himself had. They are now one step closer to fulfillment, aren't they? God is keeping his promises. This is a total reversal of Joseph's position. What a difference a day makes, huh? They have an immediate public ceremony making Joseph now the viceroy. He gets a new Egyptian name, and he's married off to the court, making him a part of the nobility of Egypt. All of Egypt bows down to him, just like God promised in that dream. Or at least, we are certainly headed in the right direction. We see also kept promises for Abraham. We can go a step further back. Joseph is just a subplot in the broader promise to Abraham, after all, is he not? God's keeping that promise also. Not only is the land, Egypt, going to be fruitful in the midst of this worldwide famine, this desert all around, but Joseph is also fruitful. Joseph has 2 sons, right? I will bless those who bless you, and I will make you a great nation and make your name great, Abraham. That's starting to come to pass. Before, Joseph was cut off from Israel, his father, and now he becomes 2 tribes instead of 1, doubling of his place. What did God say? I will make you a great nation. I will make you many nations. We're headed in the right direction, aren't we? We see also kept promises with regard to the Messiah. You see, we have to zoom out further still. God is keeping his promise to bring a Messiah into the world through whom all nations, not just the Israelites, but the Egyptians and the Assyrians and even the bad guys in our narrative, come trembling and worshiping and get included. Look at Psalm 87. Among those who know me, God, I mentioned Rahab and Babylon, Philistia and Tyre with Cush. This one was born in Zion. And of Zion it will be said, this one and that one were born in her, for the Most High himself will establish her. The Lord records as he registers the people, this one was born there. We're starting to foreshadow that, aren't we? All Egypt comes and bows the knee, comes to Joseph, the enemies of God's people. Egypt and Assyria and Babylon, the Lord's chosen instruments. For their food is Joseph. They come trembling to him. Not only for Joseph, but for his family and for the whole inhabited world. Notice too that Pharaoh, who is the literal embodiment of pagan idolatry, believes. Now, maybe this is not a conversion, maybe this is not an exclusive belief, but he says things that honor Joseph's God. Can we find such a person with whom is the Spirit of God? That is a strong theological statement from the mouth of a polytheist pagan. Your government doesn't have to be Christian, but the promotion of religious plurality, in other words, not the suppression of religion, is a good thing for which God gives temporal blessings and through which he blesses all his people. Furthermore, it shows the patience and power of God, that God is the one who can change the root. Let's go back to that diagram from Paulson. How do you flip from one kind of tree to the other, where that same heat will have the opposite result? Well, you can't bootstrap yourself by your own efforts. It's God who will change the kind of tree. And that is specifically happening through the work of Messiah Jesus. Again, we're moving in the right direction here in this chapter. Do you really believe that God's word is powerful, even when it's unpopular and unwanted and unsolicited and disrespected? Lastly, let's look at redemption in this chapter. Because here's the alchemy as promised, right? Think about all of the crazy coincidences in this chapter. The exact same things that were thorns and trials and suffering for Joseph, those things are the same things, the same circumstances that themselves become blessings and fruits. For God to have uprooted and overturned those thorns prematurely would have thwarted the whole perfect plan and plucked the fruit before it had a chance to mature. God often uses suffering for the sake of our sanctification. And of course, for Joseph, this starts with those 2 extra years of jail time, so that Joseph just happens to be right where we need him to be when the light bulb goes off for the cupbearer. He forgot before, but now he's just been reminded. And it ends with this comment. And Joseph was about 30 years old. How old was Joseph when he was sold? Do you remember? He was 17. That's a long time. Do you think 17-year-old, tattletale, bratty, jerky Joseph was ready to be the Messiah, small m, the vizier of Egypt? Of course not. No, God takes his time. Only God can change the heart, can change the soil, can make a dead tree into a healthy tree. But even a healthy tree is made more fruitful by pruning, which is, of course, painful for the tree. I imagine if trees felt pain, pruning would not be very comfortable. It's lopping bits off to make more room for even more fruit, even more growth. Joseph doesn't prosper defiantly in spite of difficulty, as our typical hero stories predict. No, he humbly prospers because of difficulty. The hard stuff is 100% necessary. It's making you holy. It's making you set apart. It's making you chosen. It's making you anointed. In chapter 37, the brothers say, let's see what becomes of this dreamer. Let's see indeed what becomes of this dreamer. Now look how he names his sons. The name Manasseh means forgetting. Are you able to forget all of your thorny paths? Are you able to say, be still, my soul, through thorny ways lead to a joyful end? Forgetting what lies behind, all the past sins, all the past suffering. Dwelling on it doesn't change anything, does it? You can't erase it, but you can reframe it. Remember God, the God who turns garbage into gold, the God who redeems. He takes junk and makes treasure. What's the name of the second son? Ephraim, which means fruitful. God has made me fruitful, not out of affliction, but in my affliction. God has produced the fruit. God gets the glory. Here's just a fantastic quote from C.S. Lewis. This is what mortals misunderstand. They say of some temporal suffering, some thorns, some difficulty, no future bliss could possibly make up for this. Little dreaming that heaven once attained will work backwards and turn even that pain into glory. Tolkien says something similar. Is everything sad going to become untrue? Jesus' glory with which he is glorious in heaven right now is even yet the glory of a lamb as though slain. As we sing in that praise song, your scars will still remain. The glory that he receives doesn't erase the suffering, doesn't erase the passion, doesn't erase the thorns. It doesn't heal the wounds in his hands and his head, but he appears as a lamb that was slain, and that is his glory. Have you ever asked why? It's his glory. Now, I'm not here to tell you that all suffering is inherently or automatically redemptive. First Peter tells us, for example, in chapter 4, don't let anyone suffer as a murderer or a thief or an evildoer or as a meddler. Like, screw around, find out. If you are sitting back, stubbornly resisting God in known sin, as we sometimes do, that kind of suffering is not redemptive. Repent. God will resist you. God will make your life difficult. You might find some new thorns. He will discipline you. It may be uncomfortable. There are consequences. But you also know the difference, don't you? And some of you need to know that even when you're doing everything right, when you are walking closely with God, you need to remember that you should expect suffering in this world. Only God works because of union with Christ. He is the true Joseph. He is God's viceroy, not over Egypt, but over the whole earth. The one to whom not just the people, but all creation bows. Are you united to him? Because when you're united to Jesus, when we walk with him, when we follow in his footsteps, well, what path does he walk? If you want to be like Jesus, the cross comes before glory. If anyone would follow me, he must take up his cross and follow me. Suffering first, then glory. Thorns, then fruit. You can't skip steps. God always knows how to glorify himself in and through his children in the most efficient way possible. And the whole point is to make you like Jesus, to show forth his glory. Brothers and sisters, he always keeps his promises. He will turn every thorn into fruit in his great love for you. He did it for Joseph. He'll do it for you. He did it to Joseph to show how, and that he certainly does it for you. Will you trust in that this morning? All your thorny ways lead to a joyful end. They are producing fruit. Everything bad will become untrue. Your pain will produce a weight of glory. Yes, you will suffer in this life. External and internal. Sin and suffering. Some of that sin will produce more sin, more suffering. But God, who changes hearts, who makes dead trees alive, he doesn't take away the heat, but he turns garbage into gold. And he brings about his own glory and your good. Trust in that. Amen.